So the best things about the SVG, if we compare with other images like JPEG or GIFs, it's the first one is scalable. You can have like a very small image, and if you grow the image, you won't use any quality. The file size will be always small. If you compare, if you have like a JPEG, and if you want to do like a logo very big, or if you have the same file, an SVG, because it's like a vector graphic, the SVG file will be much smaller. And the best thing about SVG is because it's modifiable, because it's code, it's not like the other images. So with the SVG, you can go there and change like properties. You can change with wherever you have there with CSS and JavaScript. So you can do a lot of things like animations. And this is my own definition of an SVG. It's an image with superpowers. And it's perfect for complex UI. So if you're lazy like I am, and if you really need to create something unique, and you don't know too much about HTML and CSS, you can just design it and then you export it, and then you can, with JavaScript and CSS, interact with the UI. So it's much easier if you want to create something very unique. But to use these SVG superpowers, you can't use as a CSS background image or image tag, because if you use the SVG like that, actually you're not exposing the code, it's not in line, and then you can't do anything. You will have some things like good quality, but you can't like change the property, like you can change the color, or you can change the JavaScript, anything. So to use it, the superpowers, you need to, that's actually my friend, you know. So you have to use it like inline. So, but in the React world, and probably in Vue and others, to use the SVG, you have to import it as a React component or transform the SVG into GSX. And so in the first way, if you import as a React component, and to do that, you need something like SVGR, it's like a Webpack loader. If you do that and you import this way, you won't have HTTP requests, because all the code will be in line. You don't need to convert into GSX. And it's perfect for simple animations and style it with CSS. And then it's easy if you want to update the SVG. So it means that if in the future you want to replace the design that you have, you just replace with another file, and that's it. This is the way in React. If you have something like a Webpack loader or create React app that uses this Webpack loader, you just need to say import React component as logo from and the file, and then you just call the component like this, and that's it. If you inspect then in the browser, all the SVG will be there and inline. But how you can use this with Alia? So this is like a very basic example. It's
everything is go here. We're just waiting for the cabin pressure to bleed full, to low enough pressure to open the hatch. It's about 0.1 on our gauge now.
So we're listening to the moon landing by Neil Armstrong, and in here I'm using like the SVG just for this. So I'm basically importing this the icon, and you can also use for this, but in this case you can also do it with CSS, and it would be pretty easy. So to do this is basically, I have this function called use audio, where I pass the URL, where I create all my states, and then I have all in my audio. This is basically the HTML5 audio elements, and in here I'm just passing different like functions and my state, and then I have also these. I have all these states, seeing what is the duration, if it's seeking, if it's loading. And then I have another file that is my audio player. And in my audio player, I'm using that function called use audio, where I'm basically passing the URL. And then my audio element, it's here and it's hidden. And then basically, this is what I'm doing with that play pause button, that is the SVG, where I can interact with SVG, and I can toggle the play and the pause. So basically, you could do this with a button or another HTML element, but in this case, you can use the SVG to create these things. And this is what I'm doing in this component called the play pause button. So it's basically an icon, an SVG icon. And I have the pause icon and the play icon, and then I can read the state, see the state. Okay, if it's the playing, there will be one icon. If it's not playing, I will have another icon. And then this is because the SVG is in line, I can actually with CSS interact with properties. So the field is basically the color of the SVG, so I can change the color. If the SVG was not in line, I couldn't do that. It would be just basically an image that I couldn't do anything. And then I can have like small effects, transitions like this one on scale, which just grow a little bit. And then that's the result. And it's basically very simple because you can basically have an audio plugin and then you can just easily just grab some SVGs, and you have a lot of free vectors websites, and we can really easily customize and create these things. But actually, this is a very boring audio player. You think, well, why would I need SVGs and all this work just to do something like this? So let's try to improve it a little bit. So this is the same audio player. But at this time, I thought, okay, if we're talking about the moon landing by Neil Armstrong, maybe I could, like, instead of having that circle, I could have like this cute moon and a better play.
All RCU windows are clear.
So basically it's the same. And imagine that you can have your website with your podcasts, and if your website talks about birds, because he has like a bird t-shirt, you can have like a bird, or it can be much funnier. And the way of doing this, I just basically grabbed another icon, and this icon I got it for free at the Flat Icon website, and I just got it, and then I just replace it here. So instead of having that circle, now I have this moon, and it's the only thing. And just a little bit of CSS, and the result.
Everything is go here. We're just waiting for the.
And the second way in React, if you want to use, so the first one, it was you just import the SVG, and then it will be in line. It's actually perfect if you just want to use CSS. But if you want to use things like on click, this will happen, or event handlers, you will need to convert into GSX. And in React world, GSX is basically almost the HTML part. So if you transform into GSX the SVG, you won't have HTTP requests. You can have like code splitting. You can split the SVG in different parts. And you can, the best part is this one, because you can make use of props, states, and event handler. But then it's really complex if you already have one design and someone wants to replace one part of the design, but because you already start splitting everywhere, and then you just want to change that part, you have to find that it gets really, really complex. So this is an example of illustration that I transformed into GSX. And so my idea here was to create something like for kids. So on click, I just playing the sound. So you can use this if you want to create like your storybooks for kids, or even like a website. And it's much easier, so easy, because you just grab the illustration and then you convert the illustration into GSX. So the first thing is you need the design tool, or you can grab it from a free website when they give like free SVGs and vector graphics. And then to transform into GSX, I'm using the SVG RCLI. There in my package JSON, I basically have like this script where I'm basically copying my SVG, and then I transform it into a component, and then I run as we go config. this is what SVGo is like optimizer, and my optimizer, I just say that I don't want to clean up my IDs. And the reason I always leave the IDs in the SVGs is because then it's really complex if you want to find something. So somehow the IDs can guide you through the code. So then when the SVG RCLI runs and transform my SVG into a component, this is what it looks like, SVG components. And then I'm also using a library called Framer Motion to create animation. And then basically, it's really easy to use this Framer Motion library. You just replace your SVG's elements. In this case, it's the group element. And then while over, I want to scale. On click, I want to play this called boy. And boy is basically my audio. And I'm using the audio HTML element. This is not the React tank, it's a pure HTML. So I'm creating a new audio element. And this is my audio. And that's basically like the result. So when I click, I'm playing the girl and I'm playing the boy. And this is a much more complex example. It's called the cassette tape. And the story of this cassette tape, it was 4 or 5 years ago when I was living here in Lisbon. I decided to take an iOS course, and I went to the edit school. I need to know the school. And at the end of the course, we all have to do like application, iOS app, and that's when I realized that I was good just being a designer, because it was so complex at that time, and it was like with C, I don't know, it was too complex for me. But the worst thing is I could achieve the code, but my design was awful. And at the end, you have all this, at that time, you had to use this auto layout. And I couldn't achieve the design that I wanted. And years after, I moved to Dublin. And one day I was just looking into my computer and I found this design on my sketch files. And I was like, yeah, this is the design that I wanted to achieve, and I never achieved it. So I said, what can I do now? Is there any technology that I can use nowadays that I can create the project that I want? And what I really wanted was just to press play and to play an hip hop loop so I could record my own freestyle, because I like to do hip hop freestyles. Don't know why. And yeah, so at the end, I started seeing which technology I could use, and then I realized that nowadays you can use the Web Audio API and browsers. So you could actually, and on Google Chrome, to record your voice, to play audio. So I said, yeah, maybe I can just export this cassette tape as an SVG, and then I can animate it. So once again, what I did, I exported that cassette tape as an SVG, transformed into GSX using that script, and I left the IDs, and then this was the final component at the end. So you can see here, this is like the IDs, and the reason I like to leave the IDs is because if I want to animate the time box, or if I want to animate the play and pause button, the only way that I can see if it's the play or pause button is to follow or search for the ID. If I didn't have this, I would only have G, paths, text, and it would be almost impossible to find. And then this was the way, because if you transform the components into GSX, you can actually split the code. So the way I split it was I have this main cassette tape and then different parts. So the main cassette tape is importing the small parts like the track the title, center, buttons, and I'm not good at names, so one part is called center. And then, like this is actually the cassette tape where all the states lives. It's like the parents component, so every function lives here and states. So I'm basically saying, passing like the states, if it's recording, if it's playing, what is the current track, the playlist. And then I have all these type of functions, play, where my code is not that good, believe me. I'm just like doing this type of if statements. If is playing, this will happen else, and I can have a lot of if and else. And I believe a good developer would say, I can refactor your code to complex. And then the same for recording. It's recording this happen, you know, and you can see all the mess. And the previous track, where I'm actually just seeing what is the current track, and then you can go to the next or the previous one. And this is like the main wrapper. So inside the cassette, I have all that small components, the center, time box, track title, and then I can pass to the children components all the states. So let's say the center will receive the state if it's playing or not, and the buttons will receive all these event handlers, the play, record, stop recording. Actually, now I'm thinking this stop recording is, I wouldn't need, maybe it's just this record to toggle this record or not. One day I can improve that. And this is like the center component. So in the center component, I'm receiving that state from the parent, so I can see if it's playing or not. And then if it's playing, I have this animation that I'm doing with Pop Motion. It's a library, and Pop Motion is not only for React, you can use in any JavaScript project. And I'm doing this wheel animation, basically rotating the wheels of the cassette tape. And then in my buttons, I'm just like on click and that playing the current track. And that is the final result. I was thinking because the audio is a little bit weird. So basically you can just, and you can record your voice, and then we will have something like this where your voice was recorded. And basically I'm just when I record the voice is from the microphone input, so the quality is not that good, and that's it. So now that I showed the code, I have to do the hip hop part, and we can do this together. So where I have this fire, you just need to say this part where I have the fire. So I will say something like, I'm coding like a criminal, designing like a miracle. They say I'm invisible, and all of you, for this I'm original. Let me just try to see. Because the sound quality.
Power on. Connected.
Okay, it doesn't matter the quality. So let's try once and then with the beat. So I'm coding like a criminal, designing like a miracle. They say I'm invisible.
For this I'm original.
Okay, I'm coding like a criminal, designing like a miracle. They say I'm invisible.
For this I'm original.
Okay, so now let's start. Short and that's it. So I always say at the end of my talk, let's make the web fun again. One day I realized that this is look like let's make America great again, but it's not. It's just I just think that nowadays we're not doing funny things anymore. We just like, especially those UX people, and I'm one of them. And we're just like doing well websites nowadays look like Bootstrap. Like we all have the same UI, so I think we can create so many things and be more creative. And at least if in products we can't use like we can be creative doing products. Maybe in our portfolios or our side projects, we can have like these crazy UIs with SVGs. And so let's do it. And thank you.